Hello, welcome to the number 8 open mic'd here at Holyoke Public Media. Open mic'd is a monthly open mic with a featured reader that happens here at Holyoke Public Media. This is a recorded evening, so if you wish to not have your poem included in the final production, please come and talk to me after the show, and we'll see what we can do about that. If not, if you have no problem with that, you can find it on Holyoke Channel 15 or on YouTube after it takes us about a week to get them up. We have 3 open mic readers tonight, and normally we would ask that you keep it to about 5 minutes, but no, forget that nonsense. Read as long as you want. This night is brought to you by Attack Bear Press and Holyoke Public Media, who have partnered for this, and brought to you by a generous grant from the Holyoke Local Cultural Council and Mass Cultural Council. So our first featured reader tonight is ESP. I'm sorry, I know you signed up for second, but you're first tonight, so thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. I'm Eric, or ESP. I just want to let people know, too, that I've recently put together about a compilation of about 30 poems that I'm hoping to get published at some time this year, called Brutal Rhymes for Brutal Times, because we definitely do live in some brutal times. This first poem is called I Didn't Ask to Be Born. She said I reminded her of her father. She had come to ask my advice. Of course, I told her it was wholly her choice. I told her I didn't ask to be born. I never asked to be torn from a soothing, warm, amniotic bath into the chill of a frigid world, shivering and screaming. I didn't ask to be born, but I cried out for the tit, plump and milky. I didn't ask for the glorious sunshine beating down upon my face, bringing warmth like a mother's hug. I made no queries or arrangements to be bullied on the playground and called Four Eyes, which is better than a cyclops, I guess, with its lack of depth perception. I didn't ask to be born. I was not made to fit into your rigid cookie-cutter paradigm. I am the triangle in a child's wooden-shaped peg puzzle. I can fit into the circle, but not securely, and am exposed on all sides. I didn't ask to be born. I did not inquire about the small, still hours of a winter's night, dozing near the wood stove, safe and warm, whilst flickering flames project dreams in the shadows on the walls and floor. I didn't ask to be born. It's a catch-22. You'd have to be crazy to ask for the pain, sickness, and the suffering. Who would ask for the small, still hours of a winter's night, lonely and shivering in the darks whilst watching nightmares projected in the shadows cast by passing motor cars on the walls and floor? Getting out of it seems natural, a human response like war and AI. Mean little boys building and knocking down each other's castles built in a sandbox full of sand fleas, except the sand is soaked in blood. I didn't ask to be born. I didn't ask for the elevated blood pressure, sacred release of oxytocin and dopamine of an intense orgasm. But I'll take it. Along with a handful of SSRIs. I didn't ask to be born. I didn't ask for pickles on this misshapen, flavorless, sorry excuse for a burger which looks nothing like the picture. I didn't ask for yet another flavor of Oreos. Who keeps asking for this? Is it you, Bill? I think it is you. I didn't ask to be born. I didn't ask for these sharp, jagged, and dangerous memories. You know the ones. Capable of opening a vein or an artery. Because the end, that's part of it too. The last part, with its eulogies, fragrant flowers, and decay. I didn't ask to be born. I didn't ask for any of it. I didn't ask for your kiss, sweet and soft, with just a hint of bitter, warm red wine lingering on your lips. I didn't ask for this music or this dance, spinning and floating across the dance floor, lost in your eyes, and just a little drunk on bitter, warm, red wine. No, I didn't ask to be born, and yet, still, I think it is a miracle. I told her I don't know a woman that has gone through with it and not been haunted by what could have been. And when I heard it was done, of course, I understood. But I also felt grateful. To a scared and pregnant teenage girl from long ago, I felt grateful that I am not the ghost in this poem. Thank you. Time for one more? I will find it. This one is called Protection. What is protection? Protection is the plastic and styrofoam helmet on the head of a 5-year-old as they take that first ride without training wheels. Protection is the click of a seatbelt and an airbag undeployed. Protection is a safety harness that keeps you from falling off the roof. Protection is the blue vinyl gloves and surgical mask that keeps disease at bay. Protection is auto insurance on your new luxury sedan. Protection is a condom in the fumbling hands of an awkward teenage boy on prom night. Protection is the orange vest you wear while fishing on the boat. Protection is the screeching smoke detector that rouses you from your bed at 3 a.m. And protection is the soft embrace that lulls you back to sleep. What is destruction? Destruction is a bullet lodged in the spine of a 5-year-old who will never take that first ride without training wheels. Destruction is twisted metal and the stench of burning rubber. Destruction is 6 dead at a Virginia Walmart with a gun bought that very morning. Destruction is an assault rifle firing multiple rounds into 31 people in some quaint little Maine town. Destruction is Sandy Hook. Destruction is Uvalde. Destruction is an AR-15 in the fumbling hands of an awkward teenage boy on prom night. Destruction is your best black suit you wear to yet another funeral. Destruction is the fear of sending your kids to school that keeps you from your bed at 3 a.m. And destruction is the incessant worry that it won't allow you to fall back asleep. Destruction is growing exponentially. My brother says the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And my brother is a good guy, I think. He is solid and dependable. He's the type of guy you want in your corner if you're ever in a scrape. But everyone's the hero of their own story, and you go on being the hero right up to the moment when the music crescendos and the big plot twist is revealed. And then you suddenly realize that you're the villain too. Except this is no movie. Thank you.
Thank you, ESP, Eric. Thank you very much for everyone for coming out tonight. This is open mic'd. I say this 3 times during the night, but we are brought to you by a generous grant from the Holyoke Local Cultural Council and Mass Cultural Council. I say it 3 times so they can't accuse me of not giving them their credit for giving us money to do this. And also, can we get a round of applause for Holyoke Media for hosting us? They do this monthly. They put in so much work. Johan, Natalia, Scott, the whole team really do us an amazing solid. And now we have a first-time reader, Arnold. Arnold, please come up.
Thank you very much. As just said, my name is Arnold, and believe it or not, it's Arnold Palmer. Same name, different game. All right, this first poem that I'm gonna do two quick short poems real fast. This first poem that I'm gonna do, I hope you can relate to. I think we all possibly can relate to this. And the title of it is titled Secrecy, because we all, in some way or another, have secrets. And it goes like this. Now, it's time. It's time to see that the secrecy is that there are those that think and believe that I cannot see what it truly be. So they just continue to pretend to be another friend to me. But in reality, they are worse than enemies because they so damn close to me. Needless to say, that in actuality, all of the secrecy is because there's no loyalty, there's no honesty, and in their hearts, there's nothing but larceny. Yet, they want to question my integrity, my dignity. They don't even have a common decency to come to me. Instead, they rather hide from me. They rather lie to me. Because truthfully, they just want to see the end of me. But that would never be. And that, ladies and gentlemen, will be the end of all the secrecy. Thank you. That's secrecy. All right, this next poem is one of my favorites. It happens to be one of my favorites because I created this poem when I first came up here to Massachusetts from Philadelphia. I'm going to do a little prelogue to the poem so you can understand where I was coming from and where I was at when I created this poem. See, when I came up here from Philadelphia to Massachusetts, I was lost. I mean, I was in search of something, or should I say, in search of someone. And that was none other than myself. So I created this poem to reflect that. And the title of this poem is titled, Looking for Me. And it goes like this. Looking for me and not who I pretended to be. So who am I? Look around. Where am I? Perhaps somewhere trying to hide. Yes, hide from what's inside. So how would I be able to find me when all I do is hide from me? All I do is lie to me, just continue just to deny me. I must no longer pretend. And only then will I become my own true friend. Now they tell me life is hard, but it's fair. Ain't always fair. Sad, but it's true. But if I could find myself, perhaps so can you. Let's just be true in all that we do and watch the magic of how life becomes new. Yes, it's time. It's time to find a peace of mind, even if it happens to come through this rhyme. Because you see now, I no longer have to walk around town looking down. And my face no longer carries a frown, for I have been found. So let God's will, not mine, be done. Thank you.
I love when a new poet shows up and just brings it. Like, thank you. Thank you very much. That was amazing. And now there's going to be another small miracle as I actually call Dana up. I got it right. It only took me 7 months.
I'm Dana Salisbury, and how's that sound? Good? Too far still? Up, down? Okay. We good? Grazing distance. Through all the noise and scratches emerge gap-toothed islands of urban grid, archipelagos of coughing faces, puckering skin, red scud, yellow clouds, a profile that might have been someone singing, a touchable cheek, a belly bulging under a glaze of saran wrap, amber ooze on top of pin-tuck stretch marks, bones with calluses, gravy skins and bloomy rinds, marks that look like grass but aren't, yesterday's uncollected stink. A gust lifts the surface. Underneath, labial gashes slice the earth. One wound hides another. Empty sleeves hang upside down. A bare spot is stunned into stupor. I see this scene in all its intimacies and hit pause. The gore is not my own. I'm hardly grazed. Don't you weep. It will be easier for you to understand this if I give you one little background piece of information, which some of you may know and some don't. The cochineal is an insect from which the natural red dye carmine is derived. Found on the pads of prickly pear cacti, they are harvested individually, knocked, brushed, or picked off the plants by hand, and then dried. It takes about 70,000 insects to make 1 pound of cochineal dye. Mary, don't you weep. Mary's knuckled hands are filled with tears. They are too gnarled to fist properly, so water collects on the thorns and needles of their cross-hatching. Squeezing the imperceptible space between thick thumbs and bent index fingers, she tries to hang on to thoughts, slippery as fish or coins for bus fare. Soon she loses her grip and her hands fall open, weep themselves dry in the sun. The spines spring up, hardened, sharp, ready to wound. Too tired and wise to expend herself on rage, she ignores the spikes and begins to collect the fuzzy white flecks speckling the paddles of her hands. Peaceably, she brushes the tiny insects off by the basketful to crush and dry, carmine for a new dress to wear with her blue wrap and leather shoes. Her feet hurt pretty much all the time, wide, work-battered, bunion, hammer-toed, collapsed, parched, cracked. Bedroom slippers are best. Pausing, eyes closed, to face the sun, her mind dances, skims the earth, and she is over the moon. Stars spangle the vastness inside her lids. Now for something completely different. Reading the clocks at the swimming pool. If I were someone altogether else, I would be able to. Now clocks confuse me. Digital did me in. I read smiley face at a glance until pixels swamped my clarity. Now the task calls for interpretation and minor math. Analog at the shallow end faces off with digital at the deep. They are out of sync by 2 or 3 minutes, depending on which second you look. I reason it's 20 minutes after the hour, or such and such an hour, 20, or 40 minutes before something, and then I lose the hour, the actual hour in question. So start with the shallows. How many pie slices fit in 40 minutes? Straight across plus 2? Or subtract 4 slices from 12? Then I'm thinking about dinner. When did I get here again? This or the other side of 12. 26 after the hour, or 28 or 29, meaning closer to slice 4 or slice 5. 5 slices past 12 or 2 slices past 15, not to mention that 2 and 5 are simply undifferentiated ticks. Bob up in the deep. The black rectangle is modest. Is that one blue number 0 or 8? From this angle, it's a crapshoot. Sadly, I'm required to figure out what 40 minutes more adds up to, and I'm hazy about which numbers to add. I don't think very well without my glasses. It's hard not to freeze up. Say what? Another sweeping hand? Oh, that's the adjacent timer display running apace. If I were another, say, for example, my daughter, I might be able to keep things straight and in their lane. She tells me numbers have personalities, and she is never wrong, or hardly ever. In my experience, she's maybe mistaken 0.009% of the time. How many zeros is that? And this last, I wrote today. It's called Coiled. Remove my coat, lay flat on the floor on my back. Flip, rested belly down, face turned. Coil, don't tread on me. I agreed those were things I should do, but said they didn't appeal to me, and until they did, I wouldn't do them. Maybe the desire would sneak up on me. She wrote to say I ought to learn humility. I cannot live like a hummingbird at full speed on only sugar water. I need meat. I am always racing ahead, trying to get to the meat of the matter. More recently, I have been thinking the real meat of the matter is not what I thought. I grill myself. Am I one of the butchers? You, meaning me, cannot or should not talk to others the way you talk to yourself. In fact, you probably shouldn't talk to yourself that way either. It wouldn't kill you to learn some graciousness. No one wants to be offered lips that pack a punch.
Dun, dun. So now comes the part of the evening where I feign to ask you if I can read a poem, where I pretend as though you have a choice because I'm standing up here in the microphone. So I'm actually going to read 2 tonight, so whether you like it or not. Yeah, because it's Poetry Month. For those who didn't know, it's National Poetry Month. So write a poem, do a limerick, do something, and keep this funny little thing we call art alive. So I will start by reading a poem that has no name. I no longer want the gravity failing, falling upward toward the sun, floating on clouds kind of love. Maybe it's that I'm bitter and cynical, or maybe this is just what 46 is, but all of that seems exhausting. That kind of love is really only good for open mic poetry or shows from the 1990s WB. I like the love that doesn't ask for a love poem. It hates the idea of one, in fact. It's a love that's had love poems written to its reflection so many times, only to be left more unseen than before. A love that's confident in its tomorrows and all the tomorrows after, because the ground under its feet and the sky is left for the illusions of rainbows and the thousands of years old lights from dead stars. This love doesn't want to dance in moments between breaths or linger in togetherness. It wants to rush, to hurry through those moments so that it can be at home, maybe in sweatpants, because nothing good ever happens at 2 a.m. So that's that. Yeah, thank you. And I swear I'm not having relationship problems, but all of these poems are about sad love things. So, what the hell? Past conversations. This is that past conversation, that last conversation, the one that I will fail to mention when my friends ask if I ever told you directly we'd fallen out of love. I miss making mixtapes from the radio, trying double hard to ensure that there isn't dead air, struggling to stop before the commercial. If I held your hand tighter, that wouldn't make it easier to find the right moment to let go. I always grip harder right before releasing, hoping to press the remainder of me into the reminder of you. And with that, I would like to welcome our featured reader before I forget, we are brought to you by a generous grant from the Holyoke Holyoke Cultural Council and Mass Cultural Council. Thank you for all of the money and support. We love it, and we need more. Yay! And now to bring up our featured reader. The featured reader tonight is a gentleman named Bill Mailer. Bill is a poet for nearly 6 decades, earned his MFA from UMASS in 1974. Initially fascinated by indigenous, Chinese, and Japanese poetry, as well as classic modern poets like Williams, Olson, Creeley, and Levertov. He continues to explore the bounds of poetic form while allowing diverse influences to help shape his work. In the current domestic and global geopolitical environment, he takes James Baldwin's advice especially to heart. What you are doing as a writer or any kind of artist, what your role is to bear witness to what life is, does, and to speak for people who cannot speak. Please welcome Bill. Yay!
Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you, Jason, for giving me this opportunity. How's this sound right here? Sound okay? Good. I've got 7 poems. I timed them out at about 35 minutes. If you're still conscious after that, I have an 8th that I'll read for you, because they're all part of a collection that go together. And the collection is called Poems of Trauma, Truth, and Outrage. So there's the trigger warning, okay? So this first one is called The Great Dying. I feel like I am remembering the future. I dream of scenes of the great dying across all continents, seas, and cities, converging the future past into the present moment, filled with such gratuitous and unfathomable cruelty that and that alone gives lie to the myth of an omnipotent and loving God. Which myth, by the way, cannot exist without a corresponding myth of evil and opposition, 2 faces of the same thing, a fatal error in the evolution of human consciousness. 2 faces of the same thing, a bifurcation of being into self and other, predator, prey, we, they. 2 faces of the same myth with which our rulers for millennia have dominated and manipulated basically good, well-meaning people into becoming complicit agents of atrocity and genocide. Part 2. Last year, $153 billion went to U.S. firms supplying 104 different countries, with another $3 billion provided gratis by the U.S. government in arms and munitions. And in so doing, turning a blind eye to the consequent planet-wide death, destruction, and suffering. The U.S. has annually provided $3.8 billion in military assistance to Israel, which means, bluntly, it is our bombs and bullets being used in a genocidal campaign to end, once and for all, the Palestinian problem by taking the land, destroying their homes, families, and culture, which is to say that we Americans could stop the slaughter and suffering by simply withholding our gifts of death and munitions. Also in 2022, 67 members of the U.S. Congressional Armed Services Committees voted without irony and virtually no debate to increase the defense budget by $45 billion to a total of nearly $860 billion total for 1 year, more than half of which goes into the pockets of private contractors, which should be no surprise, as those firms donated $800,000 in campaign funds to each of the two ranking members of the Senate committee, and over $640,000 to each of the two ranking members of the House committee, not to mention spreading several hundreds of thousands more to various cooperative members of Congress. Do you think if we had used that money instead to ameliorate global starvation and poverty and provide educational opportunities across the globe, we would have had a better chance of creating peace and security versus littering the planet with weapons and munitions? Or instead of reporting in the mainstream media news that diplomats are openly debating the pros and cons of first strike or the use of tactical nukes? How defective we humans must be that we can consider such things even discussable. Or pretend that ethnic cleansing is really voluntary migration, terming it a laudable humanitarian alternative to mass starvation in the desert, like the 1 million Armenians deported by the Turks and forced to die in the 1915 death march into the Syrian desert. And now the Israeli government gaslights the entire world after denying a whole city access to food, water, electricity, medicine, while blowing up almost every hospital, place of worship, and all 26 universities in Gaza, zeroing out an entire culture and substituting for that destroyed infrastructure, a lifelong trauma, terror, grief, and a deep, impossible to ever satisfy craving for future vengeance. Tell me, how does the wealthiest country in the world, the self-appointed guardian of human rights and civil liberty, reconcile such shameless genocidal behavior with the lofty language of our foundational values and beliefs? Is it perhaps because we have done the same, ethnically cleansing millions of indigenous peoples from the North American continent? Or more recently, being responsible directly and indirectly for 4.5 million deaths attributable to the post-9/11 war on terror? Who profits from such egregious suffering in a war that never ends? I wrote this next one on the 4th of July in 2021. Call it If I Could Be Proud. It's in several parts. Under the rock of blind patriotism, there is an unseen darkness. Under the rock of birth to death propaganda lie the facts of historical truth. Under the rock of cultural myth and social conformity lie the facts of our collective complicity. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man sees only half the truth. Part 2. If I could be proud of stealing the land and livelihood of North American indigenous peoples, destroying their heritage and culture, I would be proud of my country. If I could be proud of enslaving and oppressing millions of blacks for centuries, I would be proud of my country. If I could be proud of selling arms that wind up killing tens of thousands, I would be proud of my country. If I could be proud of polluting and destroying natural worlds and ecohabitats, I would be proud of my country. If I could be proud of the mechanized farming that grinds billions of animals annually into food that we eat, I would be proud of my country. If I could be proud of corporations exploiting the poor to make the rich richer, while billionaires sleep like ancient mythical dragons atop their hoards of gold, while thousands starve to death daily, I would be proud of my country. If I could be proud of luring young men and women into military service by feeding them false dreams of heroism, glory, valor, honor, only to leave them, in the end, discarded, maimed in body, mind, and soul, discarded like yesterday's McDonald's bag, filled with nothing but limp words and cold fries. If I were proud of all these things, I would be proud of my country. But I'm not, and I don't think you are either. Certainly not anyone with love in their heart. This is part 3. These facts are the blunt truth that becomes visible when the rock is lifted and both eyes open to the consequence of a false belief in our moral superiority and our failure to achieve the American dream. From 1979 to 2021, the average worker's wages increased by 18%, while the average CEO pay increased by 1,460%. So yes, our taxes are indeed massive handouts, but to the already wealthy, not the forever poor. The cause of today's American misery and vituperative partisanship is not those we have named left or right, black or white, woke or bigoted. It is capitalism, an insatiable need for profit at any cost to people and planet. It is monopoly, the destroyer of local business that creates quality goods and service. It is authoritarianism, the self-centered pursuit of dominance over others. It's a trick by the grifters and the uber-rich who bankroll and fabricate cultural outrage, blinding us with hatred, anger, and resentment, channeling our legitimate rage away from the powerful and toward the weak, different, and vulnerable. Part 4. I wish I could blame someone for the sorry state of this entire world. But I wish I could blame the rich. But I think it is actually an intrinsic flaw in the genomic depths of human consciousness. We all keep one eye closed and bury the unwanted truth under rocks of our own making. I also know that if it were not for a random chance of birth, I could be the dragon sleeping on top of a pile of cold gold. Had I been born in the body of a 1%er, in their family, with an outrageously expensive education, spending my summers on a yacht anchored off Barcelona, I would be no different. This is the difficult fact that sticks in my throat. There is no one person or people I can blame for the suffering in this world. It arises on its own when we humans insist on keeping one eye closed and avoid lifting the rock, rendering us incapable of learning from mistake and consequence. But you and I know at some level that a half-truth is never the whole truth. It's not even the truth at all. It's self-deception, perjury, lying by omission, and it's leading us all to the edge of extinction. This next poem I wrote in honor of the Herero people of Namibia, who were the first victims of genocide in the 20th century. I am kneeling before a hole in the sand at the edge of the Sahara Desert. My fingers are bloody stumps, crusted with sand from digging desperately in search of water. My baby beside me is dying. I am dying of thirst, and so is she. There is water only a few minutes' walk behind us in the well of our ruined village, but that way is barred by the bayonets of the Kaiser's great general von Trotha. Bayonets, you see, can be washed and reused. Bullets, though, have to be bought and are too expensive to waste on women who will die anyway. And almost all of us were dead already, caught in the trap cruelly sprung at daybreak when the mind is confused with dream and sleep, and then the surrounding sound of cannon and Maxim machine guns non-stop firing, ripping, exploding for 9 hours through the flimsy homes of our village and the soft flesh bodies of children and elders. 1 year ago, there were 80,000 of us living on land we inhabited for generations. Now there are less than 15,000, soon to be 0. The soldiers and settlers by design left only one route of escape possible, funneling those of us that had survived the mechanized carnage into the implacable, fatal heat of the Sahara Desert. My baby is no longer breathing. I am so thirsty, I cannot cry. Even my tears have been taken from me. 12,000 kilometers away, the inhabitants of Berlin will cheer and celebrate in the streets for a week the great general's heroic and mighty accomplishment. Continuing on the theme of genocide, this poem is called A Calculus of Death. If we seek to understand our own desperate folly, we need look no further than an allegedly neutral Swiss corporation, its executive staff, and departments of sales, marketing, and engineering, who collaborated with a new and very wealthy customer to design and produce a hitherto unimagined type of truck, one in which the engine exhaust could quickly and cleverly be rerouted by a single driver from the normal exit behind the truck into instead a hermetically sealed cargo box behind the cab. In my mind, I can imagine those engineers and customer representatives working jointly on this time-sensitive project late into the night. White shirts, collars loose, ties askew, estimating, measuring, blueprinting, calculating the minimum and maximum number of pieces capable of fitting on a square meter of the truck's cargo floor. Their answer, no more than 9, no less than 6. And what were those pieces? Mothers, fathers, children, grandchildren, aunts, uncles, neighbors, rabbis, shopkeepers, scholars, scientists, artists, and poets. Several dozens of these trucks were manufactured in the early 1940s and sold primarily to a single customer, the Third Reich SS, who then used these trucks to asphyxiate, and by asphyxiate, I mean murder, 300,000 Jews, truckload after truckload, day after day, week after week, month after month, from July 1942 until December 1944. What has gone so wrong with our world that basically good, well-meaning Swiss people could collaborate in such a deliberate and careful calculus of death? X pieces times Y trucks times T trips times M months equals total pieces delivered. I'm imagining now how hard those executives and engineers must have worked on this urgent industrial problem before going home to sip a small glass of warm brandy or liqueur, ensconced in the company of their safe families, nodding, perhaps, with gentle, loving pride as their prodigy of an 8-year-old daughter flawlessly plays Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. This is a more topical poem. It's called Lay the Children Down. Lay the dead children of Gaza down on their back, side by side, in the street, in a row, extending from where we are now to a point almost 4 miles in the distance. Walk along that row. Spend 30 seconds, just 30 seconds, looking at each pediatric corpse and memorizing his, her, or their features, the nature and shape of each of their wounds, and the expression on their face, if they still have a face, at the moment of death. What strategic, political, or religious rationalization could possibly justify such horrific cruelty and brutality? There is no evil force or devil at work here. It's just old men in positions of power, vying amongst themselves for ever greater dominance in a futile attempt to hide their inner emptiness behind a mask of grandiosity. This contest of old men is a contest fought by proxy and paid for with the lives and bodies of individual soldiers, civilians, and children, and justified with lies, marketing, and propaganda that dupe otherwise decent people into believing that another group of people is responsible for their personal experience of grief, pain, and that never attained hope for a better day tomorrow. This one's called 6,000. Today, November 28th, 2023, the number is approximately 6,000 dead children. Will not bring back to life even one of the 1,200 viciously butchered Israelis. Blame is irrelevant to the fact of death or the misfortune to be born in one city to one people and not to another. Blame will not bring loved ones back to life, let alone alleviate the misery of those destined to live with a leg blown off, or live with a face half melted off from the heat and blast of a 120 millimeter tank shell fired point blank into a hospital crowded with sick and wounded, where babies born prematurely were dying already because the hospital's electricity had been deliberately and malevolently shut off. Or to live without ever again feeling the love of their parents, whose intact bodies will never be found. Only smears of tissue, fragments of DNA scraped off the concrete rubble of a 10-story apartment building collapsed on top of them. Vengeance dishonors the dead. It abandons the experience of love for the experience of hate. It vacates the heart of empathy. Replacing it with dreams of death, killing others, can never heal wounds of hate. Only love can do that. There is no moral equivalency in death. Each dead person is an entire world, gone. Worlds upon worlds, gone. Where there was once one, there is now nothing. Where there were two, there is still nothing. Embracing that fact and learning from it is all that matters. If we truly keep our hearts open to the victims we say we loved, that love will not end, but persist in warm memory, and the question of how to best punish their killers becomes starkly irrelevant. If it were me, missing a limb or someone I love, or never having the opportunity to live a life free of oppression, filled with joy and hope and efficacy, what would I do? How would I calm the never-ending torment of pain in my heart, or quell the endless replay of seething violence in my brain, seeing again and again, over and over, in the eerie quiet of burst eardrums, the slow motion separation of a head into atoms, blood, and bone? Would I swear vengeance in a futile attempt to exorcise the grief of unbearable loss by driving a knife into a stranger's chest? Would I lose all sense of rationality and responsibility for the well-being of my human brothers and sisters in an orgy of blood and murder? I think, to be honest with myself and with you, there is a genuine possibility that I am not made of strong enough stuff. And in a moment of weakness and desperation, I might let my pain override what I know to be true and morally right, and by so doing, guarantee the continued recycling of violence, wheeling and re-wheeling across the inevitable arc of human history. This one's called How Would You Carry Your Child? Gaza, 2024. An elderly woman, probably a grandmother, is looking down at her feet carefully, picking her way over the rubble littering a bombed-out street. Her grandson, 5 years old, is holding one of her hands and vigorously waving a white flag in the other. It's hard to tell who is leading who. The two of them are the courageous van of a small group of refugees, maybe 8 or 9, driven out of hiding by hunger, thirst, and a desperate need for medical attention. Then the sniper's bullet hits Grandma, spins her around, and drops her dead in the street. The little boy turns, fear-stricken, panicked, frantic, crying, running, back the way they came. The street is empty. He is all alone, with terror, with grief. The West Bank, 2007. 2 little girls, 10 and 12, are walking home from school, hand in hand, spilling over with after-school giddiness, excited to get home and tell their mother about their day, about the way Amal's teacher had heaped praise on her artwork. Perhaps they were even singing, with Amal holding her prized drawing in one hand and her sister's hand in the other. No doubt, they also walked alongside the ruined orchard that at one time had been theirs. Soon, they would walk by the spacious home that had also once been theirs, until a settler decided he wanted it for his family and brought soldiers who forced them to leave at gunpoint, forbidding them to take their personal belongings, not food, not furniture, not even stuffed animals. Their father, on his knees, in tears, begged them, please spare the orchard. It is our only source of income. They executed him on the front steps of his own home. There was no investigation by the authorities. The soldier who pulled the trigger was never held accountable. Now, the girls are almost past the orchard in its haunting, hurtful memories, almost inside of the cramped little house they now call home, and Amal's head exploded. The 5.56 millimeter bullet, with a muzzle velocity of 2,800 feet per second, hit hard enough to push her sideways, ripping her hand out of her sister's grasp, dumping her body, lifeless, on the side of the road, with only half a head. There was no investigation by the authorities. The soldier who pulled the trigger was never held accountable. What do you think? Was it simply sport for that soldier? Was he bored? Was it maybe a way to impress his new sergeant with skillful marksmanship? Or maybe he was just having a bad day. If you were Amal's sister, how would you ever extricate yourself from this nightmare of horror? If you were her parent, how would you carry your little girl home, leaving half her head on an ancient dirt road, scattered bone, blood, and brain coagulating in the dust? It's called What's the Difference? What's the difference between a soldier and a terrorist? I am watching, transfixed, a phone video taken at a medic station in Gaza. I see the torso of a young boy on his back, lying on a gurney. He reminds me of my grandson, about the same height and build. So let's say that he, too, is 14. I watch as his body twists and turns violently, obviously in the throes of some agony not yet revealed on the screen. His face is soaking with tears. As the camera slowly pulls back, I shiver, expecting to see some horrendous injury, but there is not a mark on his body. And yet his head thrashes left and right, over and over, pressing both hands against his ears as if that would stop the sound of a tall building crumbling, as if that would keep his mind and heart from breaking apart. There's an unidentifiable piece of bright multicolored cloth in one of his fists. He is inconsolable, moaning and crying out like an animal mortally wounded in the night. The nurse says it has been 2 days since he and his 3 siblings were playing outside and watched in terror as the tall building they called home collapsed in slow motion, burying parents and neighbors beneath a giant impenetrable hill of concrete rubble and twisted steel, crushed beyond any recognition. Yesterday, the occupiers airdropped pieces of paper telling them of a refugee camp just a few blocks away where they could be safe at last and get food and water. Later that afternoon, the Minister of Defense acknowledged that yes, there had indeed been an airstrike on the refugee camp, but it was a mistake. The wrong kind of munition had been used. As if there is a right kind of munition to use on children and other living beings. In my mind, I imagine my grandson that morning, kneeling down beside his 3-year-old sister, whom he adores, helping her pull on her multicolored birthday socks. That's how he knew it was her leg, lying atop the bomb crater. Just her left leg, bare, soft skin, no blood stains. A solitary piece of a human being wearing a multicolored sock. The nurse tells us that all of his siblings, along with an unknown number of other people, just hours ago, were incinerated when jet pilots dropped multiple so-called smart bombs on their encampment of fabric tents and makeshift cardboard walls. The boy continues to sob, periodically crying out, intermittently gasping, as the pain of all the death and destruction he has witnessed quakes through his 14-year-old body, mind, and soul. How is this not state-sponsored torture and terrorism? How is this acceptable to anyone with a moral conscience and a working brain? Do the government ministers and generals imagine that he will just forget all this and put it behind him? Do they think that the pain and suffering rampaging through his young being will somehow, in the future, miraculously transmute into docility and compliance? So again, what's the difference between a soldier and a terrorist? Simple. The soldier wears a uniform. There are other external differences, but they are all superficial. What matters, what's important, is that there is no difference at all deep inside, in their twinned hearts, in their unshakable certainty that their cause is the only one blessed by God. No difference between them at all, because years of conditioning have left them credulous and convinced by authorities they trust and respect that the road to ultimate peace and security for their people is paved with bodies and blood. Neither can rest until all those they deem the enemy are dead, even the unborn, pacifists, poets, the ill, the frail. The mandate of soldier and terrorist both is to kill, and to kill until there are none left. No, none at all. Why do you suppose this is? And last poem, it's called It Takes a Village, and this is in memory of Rafat al-Arir, a poet, pacifist, professor, teacher, writer, father, son, husband, sibling, murdered in an Israeli airstrike, December 8th, 2023. They say it takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a village to make war on another village, to raise that community to the ground, burn it, bomb it into rubble, charred homes, blackened bones. The individual soldier is the point of the spear, they say. The one who pulls the trigger, steers the drone, drops the bomb. The one who does the actual killing. The one who is the direct and proximate cause of death, destruction, and disfigurement. But no soldier marches alone. War is a collective social activity with many degrees of separation between a multitude of enabling factors and people. For example, who put the spear in his hands? Who declared the war? Who taught him to dehumanize the enemy? Who put her in a situation where she had to kill or be killed? Who trained them to be unconditionally obedient to hierarchical authority? Who filled their minds with lies, propaganda, and biased news reporting? Who convinced him that if he did not kill the enemy first, they would kill his family and loved ones later? Who told her that when an 8-year-old child throws a stone at a tank, the proper response is to put a bullet through his chest, taking no chance that he will live to become another terrorist? Who quoted the holy book to justify killing innocents? Who testified that the war had their God's blessing? Who wrote the operational order that morning? Who designed, manufactured, and sold the weapons the soldiers are using? Who invented the new technology that allows devastating remote killing? Who directly profits from each death in a war that never ends? Who plants, grows, and harvests and processes the food that fills the soldier's belly? Who designs, stitches, and sews their clothing? Who finds, drills, pumps, and refines the oil without which jets, tanks, and artillery are useless? Who are the investors and stockholders whose wealth increases when the defense industry has record profits? Who are those who accumulate political power and enrich their pockets by creating fear and demonizing an alleged mortal enemy? Who donated to their election campaigns? And finally, who pays the taxes without which a government cannot wage war? That's my money. That's our money being used to kill, wound, and maim innocent people. The average U.S. taxpayer contributes nearly $3,000 a year to the Pentagon budget. So I ask, if you have a few moments, indulge me and count how many degrees of separation you can identify between peaceful, well-meaning people like you and I and the undeniable fact of endless, unjust suffering. That's it, I think.
So I'd like to thank our feature reader tonight, Bill, and everyone else who read this evening. If you were interested in being a feature with us here at Open Mic, we ask that you attend a couple open mics and then come up and be like, hey, Jason, I want to be a feature. And then I'll be like, yeah. And that's exactly how the conversation goes. Again, we'd like to thank Holyoke Media for hosting us every month. And we'd also very much like to thank Mass Cultural Council and the Holyoke Local Cultural Council for funding what we do here month after month. We are actually moving to a model in which we will be doing these on a set night rather than the wacky, wonderful world of when does it happen, you'll have to guess. We'll be announcing that set night next month. So hope everyone can be back to join us. Thank you very much. Have a great night.